उपविश्य मम वाचमिमां प्रसुप्तां सञ्जीवयत्यखिलशक्तिधरस्वधाम्ना अन्यांश्च हस्तचरणश्रवणत्वगादीन् प्राणान्नमो भगवते पुरुषाय तुभ्यं प्राणान्नमो भगवते पुरुषाय तुभ्यम्.
You see, even in good act also, you do a very good thing, there will be some other adverse effect of that. You can think about it. Those who are come as student here, you write down some such, as a homework you do it. That any good action, there will be a negative tail behind that. That somebody will be happy by that, some others will be unhappy. Or any bad action also, some good effect will be there. You can think about it and find out, give some examples like that, where it is happening. So, finding that what is the dosha of karma, here actually they are not talking about usual dosha, but they are talking about all action will bind us. That is the dosha of the karma. That is, bondage created by the action is the dosha. That means, suppose you buy a very good car. It's a good karma, you have the money, you have bought it. Now, riding in the car, you get bound to that. Maybe you want a still better one, or suppose something happens, you have to sell off the car and you are not able to ride in it, then you will suffer. That, oh, bahut acha tha, bahut comfortable tha, that was so comfortable, I am not able to ride now, go in auto or anything. So, there is a bondage created by anything we do, is it not? Suppose even when we are studying the Shastras and reveling in it, we don't want to do other things. It's a common problem with the ashram that all devotees, they want some intellectual work. Who will do the repair work and the cleaning work and all? I have to do. What else can be done? People are not interested in doing. So it is very good that they are coming for studying the scriptures and they are reveling in the scriptural study. But at the same time, whatever other manual work is there, they are not trying to do that. They are not interested in doing that. So is it not a bondage? That if you are asked to do that, you are not happy. That is the bondage, that you are not able to cheerfully do that. Suppose the Swamiji asked that, oh, better you have come, you fix the screw there. Or you look into the construction, as he did, as he told me also. I was not happy at the beginning, because I did not like to do construction. So that is a bondage. So any work, whether it is good or bad, it will always create bondage, because work we are doing motivated by desire. You should understand this law, that because we are acting motivated by desire, it is causing bondage. When we are acting not motivated by desire, it won't cause any bondage. This is the fundamental truth. Because you do whatever to be done, you are not expecting to become happy out of it or gain out of it. You are doing whatever is coming. Then there is no bondage at all. That is how Krishna has said, Yajñārthāt karmano anyatra lokoyam karma bandhanaha. Tadartham karma kaunteya mukta sangha samacharet. I will come to it again because the terms I have to explain. But he is saying that when we do any activity, tat artham, tat means for the ultimate truth. There also you can think a lot, there is a lot more to be thought. Yata pravrittir bhutanam, by that universal truth which is functioning in the whole universe, being a part of it, you do it. That is not for any personal gain. In a very simple term, Ramana Maharshi has said, Ishwararpitam nechaya kritam. Ishwararpitam nechaya kritam. How a work becomes surrendered to the Lord? Ishwararpitam means Surrendered to the Lord. How an action becomes surrendered? Nechaya kritam, which is not done out of any desire. See, surrender, how will you surrender to God? God, you don't know where He is, whether He will like me to do that or not. Even whether He exists also, you do not know. So can we surrender to the God? It is very simple. Surrender is a factor in me, in my mind. Surrender has nothing to do with God. Surrender has only to do with my mind. It is a factor, it is a parameter in my mind. So when we do it without any desire, it becomes surrendered work. It is so simple. Yajñarthat karmano anyatra lokoyam karma bandhana. So if it becomes a surrender to the Lord, then it doesn't produce any bandhana. Tat artham. You do it only for that purpose, the ultimate truth. Tadartham karma kaunteya mukta sangha samacharet. You do everything being freed of the sangha. This sangha, etc., I will explain today. I think I will. Saying that, he is saying, Tyajyam doshavadityeke karma prahur manishinaha jajya dana tapak karma na tyajyam iti chapare. Some manishis, they say that all karmas to be rejected because all actions are having they create bondage to you. They are all doshavat. They all have dosha, defect, that is creating bondage. So reject all karma. But some others say that no, all karma should not be rejected. Jajna, dana and tapaha, these three karmas should not be rejected. Natyajyam iti cha apare. That is, there is a difference of opinion amongst the panditas, amongst the learned people and all. That is what he is pointing out. Then saying this is the general opinion and the varied opinion about this tyaga, sannyasa, karma phala tyaga, etc. He says that nishchayam shinume tatra. Now you listen to my conclusion or my resolved opinion. Nishchayam shinume tatra. About this topic, now here my confirmed opinion or confirmed view. What is that? Tatra tyage bharata sattama. O bharata sattama, about this renunciation, you hear now my confirmed vision or confirmed opinion, confirmed view. What is that? Tyago hi purusha vyagra trividha samprakirtitaha. That tyaga also, O purusha vyagra, O the great purusha, tyaga also is of three kinds. Now this statement he will not deal right now, it will come after 2-3 shlokas. This three kinds means that he is again emphasizing this three guna model, sattva, rajas, tamas, which has started from the 14th chapter and continuing. I said that this three guna model makes the sadhana absolutely practicable. Anybody can do it because it's a question of changing the guna constitution of our personality. If I am a tamo pradhana, if in my personality tamo guna is high, I have to change it by applying, by imbibing rajoguna as well as sattva-guna. Rajoguna will look after the inertial part of the tamoguna and sattva-guna will look after the ignorance part of the tamoguna. So both sattva and rajas have to be cultivated to deal with the tamoguna. Similarly, if I am a rajasika person, that rajasika desire-oriented, fragmented viewpoint has to be tackled by imbibing sattva-guna. To change the guna constitution and becoming sattva-pradhana. And that all these are discussed, what are the sattvika sukha, what are the sattvika karma. So you read sattvika things, you do sattvika karma, you think about sattvika things, you take sattvika food, you wear sattvika dress, everywhere. What is it is told. So the more and more you get involved in the sattvika things, you become, your personality also will imbibe sattva guna. It is absolutely a direct sadhana. Nobody can say that, no, I don't understand. One can do, just simply you have to do. If you have the will to do, you can do. If you do not have the will to do, you will not do. That is different. So Bhagavad Gita gives great emphasis on this Triguna Tattva, that you change the constitution of your personality. And when the Sattva Guna is at its height, it is the most conducive guna to take you to the ultimate level where you transcend all the three guna bondages, that is Gunatita, to make you Gunatita. That is Sattva Guna also will create a bondage, although it is of a different kind, it is good, but that also is a bondage, and you have to transcend that bondage also. That Sattva Guna itself will take you beyond the Sattva Guna. When the Sattva Guna becomes very strong and you get bound by it, that knowledge part of the Sattva Guna will tell you that what do you have to do. You have to surrender your preference towards Sattva Guna also. The preference and prejudice will have to go. You have to. So the surrender that takes us beyond the bondage of Sattva Guna also. Surrender of all preference and prejudice. So this is he is going to say that the Tyaga also is of three kinds. Saying that he is now his opinion, that is Vedavyasa or Krishna's opinion. Yajna dana tapah karma na tyajyam karyam eva tat yajno danam tapaschaiva pavanani manishinam. I think you should repeat it. This shloka should be remembered. Yajnadana tapah karma
Yajnadana tapah karma
natyajyam karyameva tat
Natyajyam karyameva tat
yajno danam tapaschaiva
Yajno danam tapaschaiva
pavanani manishinam
Pavanani manishinam
yajnadana tapah karma
Yajnadana tapah karma
natyajyam karyameva tat
Natyajyam karyameva tat
yajno danam tapaschaiva
Yajno danam tapaschaiva
pavanani manishinam.
Pavanani manishinam.
He confirms the statement that Jajja Dana Tapaha, Jajja, Dana and Tapas, these actions, Natyajyam, it is not to be renounced. Not only that, it is Karyam, they are to be done, they are Kartavya, Karyam. Karyam means that has to be done, that should be done. Why? Because Jajno Danam Tapaschaiva Pavanani Manishinam. Even the Manishis who are saying that all the karma have to be rejected. What did the Manishi say? Tyajyam doshavadityeke karma. That some Manishis, they say that all karma has to be rejected. Here he is saying no. Jajna, Dana and Tapas should not be rejected. Because for the Manishis also it is Pavanani. Pavanani means purifying, relieving, liberating, purifying. So those who are saying everything should be rejected, they are not the right sayers. Even for them also these three kinds of karmas are Pavanani, purifying. Now to understand these in the present context, we have to understand each term, Jajna, Dana and Tapas, because none of us are really doing this, but we are doing, not understanding fully perhaps. So, normally Jajna means that offering in the Homakunda, that is called the Jajna, the ritualistic Jajna of the Vedas. Now, the Krishna had always the cleverness of reinterpreting everything. Normally, why do the people use? Now nobody does Jajna. So if that Jajna is the Jajna, then the Bhagavad Gita does not have the eternal significance. The statements will not have the eternal significance, is it not? Now none of us is performing Jajna. Are we going to start doing Jajna from tomorrow? Nobody, even if I say, will not do. I am also not doing. So we have to make that Jajna concept universal and eternal, applicable to all over the world, not only the Indians, and also eternal. Any period of time it should be applicable. So he defined yajna in the manner that in yajna, what are we doing? We are offering some solid and semi-liquid things, and they are all getting vaporized. They are becoming subtler, lighter and all. And why are we doing? Thinking of some deva or something, that some natural force or some godhead, that it is not for our purpose. We are doing it as an offering to some unknown power. Is it not so? So at least it is not, I am not doing for filling up my hunger or having some joy or anything of that sort. I am doing it for some, offering it to some unknown power. So it is a non-selfish act generally. But the fact remains that in the Karma Kanda of Vedas, these yajnas are always linked with some reward after the body falls. Say, if you do a particular, say you do the Vishwajit Yaga, the Vedas say that you will go to the highest heaven. So we have doubt that now I am enjoying the life, but what will happen when the body falls? Will I be in the heaven or will I go to the hell? So naturally they have put a reward with the yaga that if you perform this yaga, then you will go to this heaven, that heaven. There are various kinds of heavens described and various kinds of yagas also are there. That means here the point is that it is a desire motivated action. That unless I am interested in going to heaven, I will not do yaga. It is a desire motivated action. Whereas in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna explains yajna absolutely reverse way, that anything you do, if it is not motivated by desire, it becomes yajna. Tadartham karma kaunteya yatah pravittir bhutani jena sarvamidam tatam swakarmana tam abhyarcha siddhim vindati manavaha. It is in 18th chapter later. That by which the entire universe is permeated, which is the substratum of the whole universe, you worship that truth, that consciousness with whatever you are doing. What does it mean? That means whatever we are doing, don't connect it to your selfish gain. We are doing it for some objective result, but not to become happy by gaining the result, not for any personal gain. We are doing it thinking of the ultimate truth. The whole universe is moving. They are doing, each is performing their action. Each is doing its own activity because they are all a manifestation of the same truth. Like that, the same truth is manifested through my body, mind, personality, doing whatever functions I am capable of doing, given the situation where I have to do. So thinking of this ultimate truth, you do everything. Swakarmana tam abhyarcha. Whatever is my work, you do it as a worship for that ultimate truth. So he says that Yajyarthat karmano anyatra lokoyam karma bandhana. 3.9, third chapter, 9th verse, if I am correct. Check. Yajñarthat karmano anyatra lokoyam karma bandhana. Tadartham karma kaunteya mukta sangas samachara. He says that if you do anything other than with the idea of yajna, then it creates bondage. Now you relate all the concepts. Whatever we do with desire in mind, anything desire motivated, automatically that creates bondage for us. Here he is saying that if you don't do with the yajna attitude, then it creates bondage. Then the yajna attitude is nothing different from the desirelessness. So if you do it as a yajna for that ultimate truth, then it will not create any bondage. So Yajñarthat karmano anyatra lokoyam karma bandhana. One who does not do the actions with the yajna attitude, for him the whole world is creating bondage. Lokoyam karma bandhana. Everything he does will create bondage. It will result in his sukha, dukkha, depression, elation, everything. Sukha, dukkha, there is no problem. But in sukha we become elated, in dukkha we become depressed. That is the problem. So he is saying that tadartham karma kaunteya mukta sangas samachara. Therefore you do thinking of that tat, that means the ultimate truth. And how do you do mukta sangaha? Being freed of sangaha. Now we have to understand what is the sangaha. So as far as the yajna concept is concerned, remember it that the Vedic yajna, the traditional yajna, is always done with desire. It is always desire motivated for a particular reward. And that will create bondage. But if any action we do, whether we perform homa or not, it doesn't matter. It becomes, the concept becomes universal, eternal. When we convert any action we do without desire, then it becomes a yajna. Now come to Mukta Sangaha. What is the Sangha? In second chapter, Dhyayato Vishayan Pumsaha
ध्यायतो विषयान् पुंसः
Sangasteshu Pajayate
सङ्गस्तेषु उपजायते
Sangat Sanjayate Kamaha
सङ्गात् सञ्जायते कामः
Kamat Krodho Bhijayate.
कामात् क्रोधोऽभिजायते.
This is a very important verse because we think that the kama is already there, the desires are there, what to do. He says that the desire is an offshoot of something else. It comes in the second step. What is that? Dhyayato Vishayan Pumsaha Sangasteshu Upajayate. By constantly thinking about something, Vishaya means the objective world. Constantly thinking about objects, we develop a desire for it. Now here I would like to go to a subtler level. It is not the thinking about the object that generates the desire in us. We can think about objects. Suppose I have to do a work. Don't we have to think about the work constantly throughout the day? It will not create any desire at all. It will create desire when the ego gets mixed with my thought. I will give you an example. Suppose you read, I have told so many times, a tragedy, a book, a novel, a tragic novel, or you see a tragedy film and you profusely shed tears. Those who are Bengali, Pathar Pachali, I have seen 6 times or so. To go to the cinema hall and shed tears, paying money. You profusely shed tears. Are you not enjoying that suffering? Otherwise, why should you go again and again and read and pay money also? We do enjoy suffering. When it is expressed very well, we do enjoy the suffering. But the same thing when it is about to happen or happens in our family or in our case, then we start howling that why did it happen to me? We are not able to enjoy the suffering anymore. The same suffering taking place in our case. Where lies the difference? You have to think very well. When you are seeing the suffering in the film or reading about the suffering from the novel, that ego is not associated with that suffering. You are not thinking about what will happen to me if I read it, be dying after this or so, anything like that. You are not thinking about your fate by linking your fate to that. But when the wife or the husband dies, oh, who will look after me? Not only the husband, in the wife's case also husband thinks that wife is now looking after me, I am sick, who will look after me if the wife dies? So there we are always, the suffering is related to my fate, my happiness, my suffering. That egoistic, selfish part is involved. Are you able to understand? You have to think very well, then everything will become clear. This is called Sangha. That the same scene of suffering or the story of suffering, you are shedding profuse tears, but you are enjoying because you don't have the Sangha to that scene. When that same thing happens in your case, because of the Sangha, that you are not able to enjoy the suffering. Otherwise, suffering is more enjoyable than happiness, because the mind goes to a deeper level. Suppose you read a fun book, only jokes and all, you will enjoy, but that enjoyment will not be so deep and overpowering. But when you read a deep, tragic novel, how much deep the mind will be, the enjoyment will be much more there. It's a different kind of a deeper enjoyment, is it not? There also, once I had told about this, so the listener said that, I don't read such novel. When I read and find that suffering is there, I cannot bear it, so I close it down. There comes the capacity. What capacity? To hold anything. Suppose in the sea, in the deep sea, we have huge waves. Sometimes tens of hundreds, or 10 meters, 20 meters, 30 meters, it can be any length. Because of the depth, the wave is sustained. Huge waves are sustained. The same wave, when it comes to the shore, it breaks and it forms a small ripples finally. Have you not seen? The breakers are happening because the depth of the sea is coming down. If you find a sudden cut sea, where it is not shallow, the beach side is not shallow, you will not find so much of breakers. The huge waves will come and hit against the shore. The waves are breaking because the depth of the sea is not there which can contain the waves. Like that, if you are not able to contain suffering, you have to increase the depth of your mind. The more the depth of your mind, you will be able to contain more suffering. That is why the knower's suffering is much more than other people. They are both bliss, suffering, everything is much more. They have to increase the capacity, the depth of their mind to contain them. এত প্রেম আমি কথা পাবো না তোমার হৃদয়ে রাখিতে না. That we ask God to come and sit in our heart. But God is such a dimension, if the heart remains small, chicken-hearted person, how can God sit there? We will not. That is why when the bliss you get, you become ecstatic and you lose control over yourself. Initially, in spiritual life also, the bliss makes you out of control.